Good morning. Today we are talking about the Black Dahlia. Her name is Elisabeth Short. Some people called her Beth. And she was born in July 29, 1924 and died of a brutal murder in January the 15th, 1947. Now this is our Murder Mystery Monday. This is episode 5. And she got the name Black Dahlia. Some speculate based off the movie called The Blue Dahlia that was a film noir murder mystery that came out in 46. Now remember, she died in 47. But also some people say she got the name because she used to dye her hair black and she would wear a lot of black silky clothes because she tried to stand out as an aspiring actress. Now, her murder was an unsolved murder, and the details surrounding it have had a lasting cultural intrigue that generates various theories and public speculation. Her life and death have been the basis of numerous books and films, and her murder is frequently cited as one of the most famous unsolved murders in American history, as well as one of the oldest solved cases in Los Angeles County, California. It has likewise been credited by historians as one of the first major crimes in post-World War II America to capture national attention. Now, just to give you a little childhood background on her, Elisabeth was born in Hyde Park section of Boston, Massachusetts. She was one of 5 daughters, and she grew up, was born, of course, grew up and relocated to Portland, Maine before settling into Medford, Massachusetts on the Boston suburb area. Now, this is where she was raised and spent most of her life. She did spend some of her life also in the winters in Florida because of some health issues, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, her father built miniature golf courses until the 1929 stock market crash. He lost most of his savings and the family became very poor and broke. Now, in 1930, her father's car was found abandoned at the Charleston Bridge, and everybody assumed that he had committed suicide by jumping into the Charleston River. Now, because she believed that her husband was deceased, Short's mother, Toby May Short, moved with her 5 daughters into a little small apartment in the Medford area and worked as a bookkeeper to support them. Now, because of her bronchitis and severe asthma attacks, Elisabeth underwent lung surgery at the age of 15. Now, like I said, the doctors suggested she relocate to milder climates during the winter months to prevent further respiratory problems. So she went and stayed with some family friends in Florida during that time. Then she spent the rest of the year with her mother in Medford and her sisters. Now, in her sophomore year, Short dropped out of the Medford High School. She relocated to California in 1942 with her father. Now, her father sent Toby, her mother, a letter of apology from, that he was not deceased, and he revealed that he was in fact alive and had started that new life in California. Now, when she was 18, she went and stayed with her father for about a year. They got into some arguments, and she moved out in 1943. Now, shortly after that, she took a job at the Base Exchange at Camp Cook. Now it's called the Vandenberg Air Force Base. But it's near Lompoc. She was living with several friends, and briefly she moved in with an Army Air Force sergeant who abused her. So, about mid-1943, she moved to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested in September of 1943 for underage drinking at a local bar. Now, the juvenile authorities sent her back to Medford, but she returned instead to Florida, making only occasional visits back and forth to Massachusetts. Now, while she was in Florida, she met a Major Matthew Michael Gordon, Jr. He was a decorated Army Air Force officer at the 2nd Air Commando Group, and he was trained for deployment to the China-Burma-India Theater of Operations of World War II. That's a long tongue twister. Now, Short told her friends that he had written to propose marriage while he was recovering from injuries from a plane crash in India. She accepted the offer, but poor Gordon died from a second plane crash in August of 1945, less than a week before the surrender of Japan ended the war. So she relocated to Los Angeles in 1946 in July to visit the Army Air Force Lieutenant Joseph Gordon Fickling, whom she had known from Florida. Now, Fickling was stationed at the National Reserve Air Base in Long Beach. She spent the last 6 months of her life in Southern California, mostly in that Los Angeles area. Shortly before her death, she had been working as a waitress and rented a room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. Now, Short had been variously described and depicted as an aspiring or would-be actress. According to some sources, she did in fact have aspirations to be a film star, though she had no known acting jobs or credits. Now, prior to her murder, right before her death, in 1947 on January the 9th, she had returned home from a brief trip visiting a friend, a man by the name of Robert Red Manley, who was 25 years old. He was a married salesman that she had been dating. They called him a traveling salesman, but Manley stated that he dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel and that she was supposed to be meeting her sister, who was visiting from Boston that afternoon. But by some accounts, the staff at the Biltmore recalled having seen Short using the lobby telephone. And then the doorsman was supposedly waving bye to her later that night. Now, shortly after, some people say that they saw her at the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, which was not even half a mile from the Biltmore Hotel. But her body was discovered the morning of January the 15th, 1947. So she went missing from January the 9th and wasn't found till January the 15th. She was found naked and found severed into two pieces on a vacant lot of the west side of South Norton Avenue, midway between the Coliseum Street and the West 39th Street. Now, near the Lambert Park. Like I said, she was severely mutilated and was completely severed at the waist. Someone had drained her blood and left her skin a very pallid white. So she was murdered somewhere else and then planted there at the park. They say that she had been killed probably 10 hours before her body was dropped off there. And you can find details of how everything was. There's also a little bit of the autopsy and identification. They tried to get samples, possibly because they thought she was raped, but everything came back negative. They couldn't find anything. So they sent her fingerprints off that matched her arrest, and that's how they were able to identify her body. Now, a lot of the examiners and people, the reporters, tried to tell her mom, Toby, that she had won a beauty contest, and we're trying to find out a lot of information on Elisabeth at the time. And so there was a lot of adventure and different things going on around that time frame, just a lot to do with her story of what had happened to her. Well, there was initial investigations, and there were letters and interviews that were sent. Now, on January 21st, 1947, a person claimed to be her killer placed a phone call to the office of the examiner and congratulated him on the newspaper's coverage of the case and stated that he planned on eventually turning himself in, but not before allowing the police to pursue him further. So then later, January the 24th, 3 days later, a suspicious manila envelope was discovered by the Postal Service, and the envelope was addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers with individual words that had been pre-cut and pasted from newspaper clippings. Additionally, a large message on the face of the envelope read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." The envelope contained her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. Now, the packet had been carefully cleaned with gasoline similarly to her body, which led police to suspect the packet had been sent directly by her killer. Now, despite the efforts to clean the packet, several partial fingerprints were lifted from the envelope and sent to the FBI for testing. However, the prints were compromised in transit and could not be properly analyzed. The same day the packet was received, by the Examiner. A handbag and black suede shoe were reportedly to have been seen on top of the garbage can in an alley a short distance from where her body had been discovered. They also had been wiped down with gasoline, destroying any fingerprints. Now, on March the 14th, an apparent suicide note was scrawled in a pencil on the bit of a fool scrap was found tucked in a shoe in a pile of men's clothing by the ocean's edge at the foot of the Breeze Avenue, Venice. The note read, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that, or this. Sorry, Mary." The pile of clothing was first seen by a beach caretaker who reported the discovery to one of the lifeguard captains. They immediately notified the police station. The clothing included a coat and trousers of blue herringbone tweed, a brown and white t-shirt, white jockey shorts, tan socks, and tan moccasin leisure shoes. They believed to be size 8. The clothes gave no clue about the identity of their owner. They quickly deemed Mark Hansen, the owner of the address book found in the packet, a suspect. Well, Hansen was a wealthy local nightclub and theater owner, an acquaintance of whose home Short has stayed with friends. And according to some sources, he also confirmed that the purse and shoe discovered in the alley were actually hers. Several roommates said that Short had rejected sexual advancements from Hansen and suggested that it could have been a potential cause for him to kill her. However, he was cleared of suspicion, and they had over 150 men that over the course that they thought were potential suspects, and they narrowed it down to about 25 because most of them had alibis for the date of her murder. They had a total of 750 investigators from the LAPD and other departments working on the case during its initial stages, including 400 sheriff deputies and 250 California State Patrol officers. Various locations were searched for the evidence, including storm drains throughout Los Angeles, abandoned structures, various sites along the river, but the searches yielded no further evidence. They even posted rewards for information leading to her killer. After the announcement of the reward, various people came forward with confessions, but most of which the police dismissed as false. So then later, the media response. Another letter, January 26th, was received by the Examiner, this time handwritten. It said, "Here it is. Turning in Wednesday, January the 29th, 10 a.m. I had my fun at the police. The Black Dahlia Avenger." The letter also named a location in which the supposed killer would turn himself in. The police waited at the location that morning, but the alleged killer did not appear. Instead, at 1 p.m., the Examiner offices receives another cut and pasted letter, which read, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." The graphic nature of the crime and the subsequent letters received had resulted in a media frenzy surrounding her death. Local and national publications covered the storm heavily, many of which reprinted sensational reports suggesting that she had been tortured for hours prior to her death. The information, however, was false, yet police allowed reports to circulate so as to conceal Short's true cause of death, which is cerebral hemorrhage, from the public. Now, further reports about Short's personal life was publicized, including details about her declining Hansen's romantic advances, and then other stories that were just made up about her. And then they found another paper clipping that said, "I will give up on Dahlia's killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." And then there was another one where in February 1st, it said, "Running into a stone wall, no new leads." So by the spring of 1947, Short's murder had become a cold case with few new leads. One of the detectives, Sergeant Phineas Brown, blamed the press for compromising the investigation through reported probings of details and unverified reportings. In September 1949, a grand jury convened to discuss inadequacies in the LAPD's homicide unit based on their failure to solve numerous murders, especially those of women and children in the past several years, Short's being one of them, of course. After the math of the grand jury, further investigation was done on her past, with detectives tracing her movements between Massachusetts, California, and Florida, and also interviewed people who knew her in Texas and New Orleans. However, all of those interviews yielded no useful information in the murder. Now, like I told you, over 500 people had confessed to the crime, some of whom had not even been born at the time of her death. And it's just crazy how many people wanted to offer up themselves as a killer. Ridiculous. Now, also, a neighbor has said that the day they stopped to dispose of the bags of lawn clippings in the vacant lot, he saw a sedan parked there with the right rear door open. The driver of the sedan was standing in the lot. His arrival apparently startled the owner of the sedan, who approached his car and peered in the window before returning to the sedan and driving away. The owner of the sedan was followed to a local restaurant where he worked, but was ultimately cleared of suspicion. So they had people after people that they thought. Several people thought that the Black Dahlia's death and murder was related to the Cleveland Torso murders, but they found out that that was not the case. They did find out the identity of the killer responsible for the Cleveland Torso murders, but they just think that the two were not related. There was even speculation that the lipstick killer was the one who caused this death as well. Now, I think, because I told y'all, I don't think that the lipstick killer, that William was the one who killed her. I told you, because he was the 17-year-old who liked to do a lot of theft and robbery. I don't think he killed Suzanne Digdon. And there are a lot of things that say that Suzanne's case and this case of the Black Dahlia are related, because both of them were surgically killed. And it was too meticulous. It had to have been somebody who was a surgeon. And, of course, we all know that the 17-year-old was not. Now, they do relate that the lipstick murders, her body, and several other women's could have had several striking similarities. Even the handwriting on the notes were very similar. The way the combination of the capitals and small letters read, it's just like they were taunting the police. It had to be somebody very narcissistic, very high IQ, just constantly doing this. Now, they did implicate a man named George Hodel of Short's killer as her killer. We're going to go into that now. This is George Hodel. Now, George was born in 1907 and died in 1999. He was an American physician, and after the 1947 murder of Elisabeth Short, who we talked about being the Black Dahlia, he was never formally charged, though, even though he was a suspect. Now, after his death, his son, named Steve Hodel, was a Los Angeles homicide detective. He's still alive, and he thinks that his dad killed Short and committed several additional murders. Prior to the Dahlia case, George here, was also a suspect in the death of his secretary, Ruth Spaulding. And her case was a murder overdose case, but he was never charged. He was also acquitted of raping his own daughter, Tamara Hodel. Now, he fled the country multiple times and spent times between 1950 and 1990 in the Philippines. Now, he is also compared to the Zodiac Killer. Hodel is. They believe that he was the Black Dahlia murderer, he was the lipstick killer, and he was the Zodiac Killer. Now, to give you a little personal history on his life, George Hill Hodel Jr. was born in 1907, raised in Los Angeles, California. His parents were of Russian and Jewish ancestry. He was the only son. He was well educated and highly intelligent. Y'all, he scored 186 on his early IQ test. He was also into music prodigy, playing solo piano concerts in Los Angeles at the Shrine Auditorium. And a composer named Sergei Rachmaninoff would travel to his parents' house all the time to hear him play. Now, he attended South Pasadena High School and graduated at the age of 15. He entered the prestigious college in California Institute of Technology, Caltech, back in the day, in Pasadena. He was forced to leave the university, though, y'all, after being there just 1 year. Why, you might ask? He was involved in a sex scandal that involved a professor's wife. Though this is not the only account, he had impregnated the woman and wanted to raise their child together, but she refused. The affair between Hodel and the woman had caused her marriage to fall apart. Now, around 1928, he was involved in a common law marriage with a woman named Amelia, had a son by her named Duncan. And in the 1930s, he was legally married to a model from San Francisco named Dorothy Anthony. This is the daughter that they had together, Tamar. Now, Hodel graduated from Berkeley pre-med in June of 1932. Immediately after, enrolled in the medical school of the University of California, and he received his medical degree in 1936. Now, he opened up and established a very successful medical practice and became head of the county's Social Hygiene Bureau. He was moving in affluent Los Angeles society by 1940s. He was enamored, y'all, with the dark side of surrealism and the decadence surrounding the art scene, and was friends with such artists as the photographer Man Ray and film director John Huston. Y'all know those two have a history behind them as well. So I highly recommend y'all research them so you'll know more about what their personalities are like. Now, Ray and some other surrealists shared an interest in sadomasochism and the dark side of art and philosophy. With these young men of the Hollywood scene, he shared a very fondness for partying, drinking, and womanizing. Now, Hodel's second legal wife, who he married in 1940, was John Huston's ex-wife, Dorothy Harvey. She basically went out of the frying pan and into the fire, y'all. He called her Dorero, though, to avoid confusion with his other wife, Dorothy Anthony, at least within their circle, but it's better known to the press as Dorothy Huston Hodel. Now, Hodel purchased the Salden House in 1945 and lived in that Hollywood property from 1945 until 1950, so for 5 years. The structure was built in 1926 by Lloyd Wright. That's right, son of the noted American architect Frank Lloyd Wright. He has since been registered the house as a historical landmark. Now, Hodel was effectively a polygamist in this large household, and in the 1940s, during the period of the deaths of Spalding, which was his secretary, and Short, the Black Dahlia, Hodel was living with Dorero and their 3 children, including Stephen, who would later write books outlining a case to prove his father a murderer. Now, with his first legal wife, Dorothy Anthony, and their daughter, Tamar, and at times, his common law wife, Amelia, mother of Hodel's eldest child, by that time an adult, he was also prone to taking a series of temporary lovers, and multiple witnesses later suggested that he did have a relationship with Short. And it's said that he could possibly, she was one of his clients, with him being a surgeon and physician and everything. It could have been that she knew him from the medical practice. Now, Hodel left the United States in March of 1950 for Hawaii, then a U.S. territory, where he married an upper-class Filipino woman, Hortensia Laguda. After another 4 children, then divorced in the 1960s. She was later a member of the Philippine Congress of Hortensia Stark. Now, Hodel returned to the U.S. in 1990 and married legally for the 4th time to a woman named June in San Francisco, where he remained for the rest of his life. He died in 1999 at the age of 91. Now, surrounding Hodel. This is where it gets interesting. Hodel first came under suspicion, y'all, for murder in 1945 following the death of his secretary, Ruth Spalding, by a drug overdose. He was suspecting of having murdered her in order to cover up his financial fraud, such as billing patients for tests and that were never even performed, and then also for protection of various valuable secrets he had obtained about police and politicians from clients for his illegal abortion services. At about this time, Hodel lived briefly for China, where he worked with the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. This did not come to public attention, though, until 2004. Now, in January the 15th, 1947, I told you about Elisabeth Short here, who was murdered at the age of 22. And I told you she suffered a very gruesome mutilation of her body, and the case was never solved. However, authorities at the time think that he was one of the various suspects suggested in that case. One, because of his strong connection to surrealism, including the works of Man Ray in particular. And if you look at some of those art pictures, y'all, it has some weird stuff that kind of looks like some of the ways her body was found. Now, in late 1949, Hodel's teenage daughter Tamara accused him of incestuous sexual abuse and impregnating her after she was given a back alley abortion, they say. Now, I've also read in accounts that he actually did impregnate her and that she gave her child up for adoption. Some people say that her daughter Fauna was, not only was Hodel her father, he was also considered her grandfather because of this. Now, if that's true or not, I don't know. There was also a movie made about it called Into the Night about Fauna, Tamara's daughter. So that'll be something else that you want to check out. But a lot of weird stuff happened at the Sowden house, which is where Hodel lived. Multiple people owned that house because, as I said, he came and went. That house had a really creepy basement, from my understanding, and it also had secret passages. And it had that Mayan Aztecan style to it. Franklin Lloyd Wright is known for a lot of eccentric architecture. And you can look up the Sowden house online and see how it looks and get a just get a vision of what it looked like and take a house tour online of that. But even though people know that he did rape Tamara, there was no, and everybody, even Tamara, think that her dad killed Elisabeth Short, and that he was the Black Dahlia killer. Full details of the investigation came to light in 2003 when the George Hodel Black Dahlia file was discovered in the vault of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. The file revealed that in 1950, Hodel was the prime suspect of the Dahlia murder. His private Hollywood residence was electronically bugged by an 18-man DA LAPD task force during the period of February the 15th to March 27th, 1950. Now, the transcripts of the conversation revealed Hodel's references to performing these illegal abortions, giving payoffs to law enforcement officers, and to his possible involvement in the deaths of his secretary and Elisabeth Short. The DA tapes recorded him saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary." Hodel was also interviewed as a suspect in the nearby June 1949 murder of Louise Springer, also known as the Green Twig murderer, though evidence to support this accusation was not publicly available until July of 2018. Now, y'all, he moved back and forth. It's also said that he could possibly be the Jigsaw killer, who was somebody who murdered 4 women in the Philippines, because he was living half a mile away from where some of them lived during that time too. Just a very, very weird man. Now, They also say that the LAPD was very corrupt at this time. They had over 200 people that were working in the law enforcement that were fired. And a lot of people said that the new people that came in considered him to be a suspect, but because he had already fled the country, they tried to let it lay low and die down, thinking that everything would just go away. Now, his name in October 1949, George Hodel's name was mentioned in a formal written report of the grand jury as one of the 5 prime suspects in Miss Short's, the Black Dahlia's murder. But none of the named suspects were submitted by the grand jury for consideration for indictment. They said they still just didn't have enough evidence to go on. Things were still ongoing. Even though they think they had enough evidence to charge him with and were about to arrest him, again, like I said, he fled the United States. He obtained a degree in psychiatry and counseled the prisoners in the territorial prison in Hawaii for 3 years, and then he moved to the Philippines, where, like I said, he started that new family, and he stayed there until 1990. Like I said, he finally died in 1999 in San Francisco without charges ever being filed. Now, his son, Stephen, has written that he believes that his father re-entered the United States multiple times each year between 1958 and 1988, and specifically in 1966 to 1969 to commit more murders, and then returned to the Philippines after that. Now, after George Hodel died in 1999, his son, Steve Hodel, which was a former LAPD homicide detective, wanted to learn more about his father. So during that process, he uncovered a lot of information that led him to believe that his father was, in fact, Elisabeth Short's killer. He found some pictures and an old photo album that contained a portrait of who they believed to be Elisabeth Short. Now, during his investigation, he learned that his father may have been responsible for more than one murder. He suspected his father, like I said, of being the Chicago lipstick killer of the 1940s, the Manila jigsaw murderer of 1967, and even the San Francisco Zodiac killer, y'all, of the 1960s, because his father was such a narcissist and wanted everybody to kind of follow, and he wanted to be intrigued and everything. But then also, these murders were related, similar, because these people taunted the police. The handwriting and the spelling of different things from the lipstick killer, the Zodiac killer, and the Dahlia killer were very, very similar. The handwriting was very similar. Now, in September of 2006, an episode of Cold Case Files hosted by Bill Curtis illustrates the mixed reaction of Steve Hodel's hypothesis outlined in his first book, The Black Dahlia Avenger, in 2003. A lot of people come to the conclusions that he solved the case and that his dad is the murderer of the Black Dahlia case. That's still open. And then a lot of people think that some of it is unsubstantiated evidence. And some of Short's relatives disagree that the photo was a picture of her. They just don't believe that that album he found was of her. Now, they also, like they said, they just didn't have time to prove or disapprove it because they had a lot of new active cases. Now, Steve Hodel has since produced 2 additional books on the Dahlia case and several books on the Zodiac killer and other cases, attempting to link them to his father. Now, also in the years following George Hodel's leaving the country, investigators from both the LAPD and the District Attorney's Office privately have stated that they believe the Black Dahlia case was solved, that Hodel was the killer, though they didn't have enough evidence to take it to trial. Specific notes were written, and that the chief of detectives, Thad Brown, said the Black Dahlia case was solved. He was a doctor who lived on the Franklin Avenue in Hollywood. An LAPD chief of police, William Parker, said we identified the Black Dahlia suspect. He was a doctor. LASD Undersheriff James Downey said the Black Dahlia case was solved, but it will never come out. It was a doctor they all knew in Hollywood involved in abortions. And then the DA, Lieutenant Frank Jemison, said, we know who the Black Dahlia killer was. He was a doctor, but we just never had enough to put him away. And the DA file confirms that the doctor referred to was George Hill Hodel Jr. Head Deputy DA Steve Kay reviewed the case and provided a legal option that the case was solved, then presented it to the then active LAPD Chief of Detectives James McMurray in 2004. McMurray, after reviewing the investigations, gave the following order to the robbery homicide detectives under his command: unless you can find some major holes in Steve Hodel's investigation, go ahead and clear the Black Dahlia murder. Well, in 2014, Detective Mitzi Roberts, the currently assigned LAPD Black Dahlia case detective, stated in an interview with KMEX Univision television newsman that they agree. They think Steve Hodel has made a very compelling theory. I think there are a lot of things that look like it, and his dad could actually be responsible for the murder. Now, in 2018, in July, while going through some deceased mother's personal effects, Sandy Nichols discovered a dying declaration letter written by her grandfather, Glenn Martin, in some 70 years before, in 1949. He wrote out things about, that were initialed and all, because he thought, just in case his daughters died, his teenage daughters were killed. He wanted people to know that what his activities were is working undercover for the LAPD detectives to help them identify and arrest the corrupt police officers. In his words, it was to try and see if other officers could be involved into crime. The Martin letter, reproduced in full in chapter afterward in the Black Dahlia Avenger 3, went on to name 17 different occasions identifying him as a personal acquaintance of Martin's, as well as himself as the killer of both the Black Dahlia Short and the second lone woman, Louis Springer, the Queen Trigg murder victim. Martin's letter claimed that both he and G.H. personally knew the Springer woman, that he believed G.H. also killed her. Now, the LAPD at that time was actively investigating the Louis Springer and Black Dahlia murders and had publicly identified them as probably connected. Well, their bodies, both of the two of them, were 2 blocks away from each other, y'all. Now, the whole thing with Hodel being compared as the Zodiac Killer, y'all need to look up Steve Hodel's books, Most Evil, Avenger, Zodiac, and Further Serial Murders of His Father. Check it out without going into the details of that. There's evidence of why they think so. There's never been any confirmed Zodiac DNA existing that can be compared with Hodel's known DNA. But they're saying that a lot of the different handwriting analysis has been similar. They also state that because the police like to be taunted in the Black Dahlia Killer, as well as the lipstick murders and things like that, all of them are a bit connected, and not many people around that time ever taunted the police like these killers did. And whoever killed all of these people were very meticulous and had to have been a skilled surgeon, which are things that they learned in school during this time in college. But he goes into great detail about that, and he goes into great detail about someone uncovering that mystery. Sorry about the phone ringing, but yes, they are saying that they uncoded and deciphered the Zodiac, some of his messages and solutions, and that it revealed the name Hodel, Hodel, in some of those things. So that's interesting to check out. We're not diving into that today, but look it up and see. There's also been a lot of TNT portrayals of George Hodel. In the 2019, they made a movie series, like I said, Fauna Hodel, the daughter, and her discovery of her grandfather, George Hill Hodel, and him being the prime suspect, and all that entailed in that. So y'all just look it up, check it out. I just thought it was very intriguing that our past, these connect, William and with the lipstick killer and these two. And I really think that William was innocent. I really think that George Hodel looks very good for this crime. I think that he was a very sneaky and conniving man, was a sadist, and was involved in a lot of womanizing and different things like that went on. Just an evil man. And they're just finding more and more out about how notorious he was. So I hope y'all have enjoyed this segment of Murder Mystery Monday, and I'll see you next time.